team just seemed like a perfect fit. And that has played out exactly as I hoped. It's been an amazing journey. Dana continues to grow and support and increase in its stability and be positioned to serve Delaware, our communities, and you, our constituents. So really excited and honored to be asked to serve as chairperson for many reasons, not just what I just said, but Sheila as a leader and the entire Dana team is so committed, so passionate, and so engaged. It kind of makes serving on the board an easy role. But secondarily, the board is so engaging as well. I think we have such a great list of names that are so well connected, so influential in our state and our communities. And for me, it's somewhat weird being the chair because I'm learning more every day from our board, and I'm sure they're learning from me. And then just serving an amazing sector in Delaware for a community that is highly engaged and is so dependent on each other. Just grateful to be a part and happy to kind of serve. And our focus on the board for the next few years will continue to be increasing our ability to serve Sheila so that Sheila can do all the things that you all ask her to do on a daily basis, and excited to kind of increase that influence. And just kicking off more formally, I do want to officially thank, on the next slide, the 2019 Board of Directors. I'll just go through them quickly. Faye Blake, Craig Crouch, who was the outgoing chair and was a great kind of mentor to me and partner over the last few years in working together and supporting Sheila. And so we wish him well on continued endeavors. Patricia Daly Lewis, Melanie George Smith, Patty Grimes, Rick Morad, Dr. Vita Pickram, Joanne Riley, Patricia Rivera, Charles Vincent, and Vicki Young Beam. And I want to just also just take a moment to thank Matthew Stell. That was a big loss for Dana, for the Dana board, but I would say more importantly for the entire state and all of us that have known him personally, professionally, in all the capacities he served in, since he had such a significant influence. And I just would like to take a moment of silence for us individually to remember his efforts. Thank you for that. He will be missed, but his impact will be remembered. I would like to take a moment to offer special thanks to our outgoing members of the board, Craig Crouch, Patricia Rivera, Melanie George Smith, for all their efforts and continued support. While they may not be on our board, we know they do so much in all their expanded roles, and look forward to engaging with them directly. So with that brief introduction, hopefully, I'll pass it back to Sheila for the next agenda item.
Thanks, Dominic. I just wanted to take a moment to thank the Dana team. The work that we do is clearly not possible without great team members, and we're going to spend a little time reflecting on their efforts a little later in this meeting, but just wanted to give a shout out to the team. Melissa Hopkins and Paul Stock, many of you know. Jenny Brand joined us in October of last year, so relatively new board member to lead our communications efforts. If you haven't met Tony, he's officially, it's his first, I think this is his 1-year anniversary this week. So Tony joined us and works in Southern Delaware. Naya Reynolds, Naya joined us as an intern a little over a year ago, and now is a Dana team member. And for those of you who joined this year, you would have, you've probably spoken to Naya, or if you've tried to register for events or a conference. Mel Carney joined us in December of last year, and she serves as office manager. And as you know, that's a critical role, keeps all of us working together. Josh Solji joined us last year as a University of Delaware Fellow, and then continued on with us this summer in an internship program. And Alani Finkelstein also is an intern, helping Jenny with marketing communications. So again, just want to give a big thank you to the Dana team. There'll be an opportunity to learn a little bit what they've been up to as we go through the meeting. I'd like to now, if it's okay with you, Dominic, turn this over to Joanne Riley, who is our governance committee chair, and so that she can announce the results of the election.
Thanks, Sheila. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here today, giving us your time. I'm very pleased to announce that the 3 candidates that for Dana Board Service have been approved overwhelmingly by your votes. Thank you for taking the time to vote. That's Mary Van Veen from the DuPont Company, Lisa Lucchese from JP Morgan, and Robert Winfrey from Discover Bank. I think I can speak for the board to say that we feel very fortunate and grateful to have recruited such talented individuals. And we believe that each of these individuals will enhance our board. And I think they each bring a unique experience to the board, which is great. And I think they have a unique experience, but I also think they have a common desire to serve the community. And I think that's what drew us to them. We look forward to working with each of them and getting to know each of them better as they serve with us. We also have 3 board members completing their first term and they've agreed to remain for a second term. That includes myself, Patty Grimes from the Freeman Stage, and Vita Pickram from Delaware State University. And want to thank both Patty and Vita for agreeing to serve an additional term. We truly appreciate their expertise and insight, and they've been such a vital part of the board to date, and it's lovely to have them for another term. And that's really all I have to say, other than thanking all the Dana members for joining us today.
Thank you, Joanne.
You're welcome.
I wanted to just take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about our mission, just in case you guys don't know. We just put on our website our 2019 annual report. It is under our transparency section of our website. So if you go right into the homepage, you'll say of who are we or who we are, and you'll see a transparency tab. And that's also where you can see our 990 tax form if you were interested to understand a little bit more of the details. Just a reminder who we are. Our mission is to strengthen, enhance, and advance nonprofits in the sector. And we're really focused on, helping to strengthen leadership of nonprofits, which includes the boards and the executive directors, to help nonprofits improve their effectiveness and efficiency by providing training and consulting services to help around strategy, and then to advance the sector collectively as a whole in the state of Delaware. And we adopted a strategic plan in 2017 with some outcomes that we were hoping to achieve. And we made a decision to undergo some research as part of our 2020 strategic planning. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, but wanted to share where we are on this. I will say, as many of you who are nonprofit leaders, measuring our outcomes has proved to be a little trickier than we had thought, because we tend to do a lot of stuff, but it's hard for us to say, are we the only ones who impacted this organization? But I am pleased to say that through testimonials, we conduct a member survey every other year, that we've continued to see progress in some of these key areas. Our annual report will feature some of the outputs for those of you who know that I teach, I teach one of our outcomes workshops. But we're pleased to see our membership continue to grow, the number of folks that are engaging in our conference and our workshops, those who've benefited from our consulting services. And one thing that I think I'm very proud of, and it again really speaks to the work that we've collectively done over the past couple of years, is that the state of Delaware is beginning to recognize that Dana, on behalf of its members, can sit at the table. And so in 2019, we're part of the Complete Count Commission for Census 2020, a very important initiative for nonprofits and for the clients we serve. And then we also sat on the Department of Health and Social Services Restructuring Task Force, a really interesting initiative and one that gave us great insight into contracts and the important need for us to revise some of those processes. And all that good work, as many of you can imagine, went on hold when we moved into the pandemic. So I'm going to turn this back over to Dominic. He was the former treasurer before becoming chair. So that's what I put that title there for you, Dominic. And that way you can share our financial performance for 2019.
Sure, thanks, Sheila. And I'll provide some overarching commentary and then pass it back to Sheila for some of the details. But I'd say obviously we're all managing through very unique times. This COVID situation is personally, professionally, mentally, physically draining, and is causing a lot of disruption in everything we do and how we think, and as importantly, our expectations around the future. And I think first and foremost, I would just like to congratulate Sheila and the team for managing through this over the last few months. And as importantly, setting Dana up for being in a position of strength in this environment. You never know when these situations arise, but the more you're prepared for them, the better off you are to focus on your mission and strategy. And I think some of these numbers really demonstrate the position of strength Dana is in. So the team can focus on our objectives and not be distracted by needing to focus on maybe things that are would get in the way. And so just want to share some of the metrics here. A net assets and very strong 542,000. For perspective, that was 220,000 last year, so significant, over 146% growth. A lot of that comes from, as you see, the outsized revenue, particularly grants and donations. Some of the grants received during the year will cover 2020 programs, but again, that demonstrates that position of strength to be able to focus in this time in supporting the industry and our constituents. And then expenses at 818,000. That's up just over 6%. So when we step back and think about the volume of work the team is doing, the increased services we are offering to manage the cost in this environment is really key. Programs at 298 was down a bit from prior year. I think that just as we focused on membership growth and some of the grant work that we do. But all in all, I would say we spent the last few years increasing the transparency from the finance committee of the board into the numbers. We've created new reporting to both serve Sheila to make her life easier in managing the day-to-day business, but connecting that with the board conversations. There's monthly board updates from Sheila directly, not only the strategic and operational performance, but the financial performance. And I know I can speak for myself and hopefully for the board that our ability to support as needed is increased because of the strong foundation we have in understanding the performance of the business. So with that, I'll pass it back to Sheila to discuss some of the specifics of the financial performance.
Thanks, Dominic. So strategically, one of the goals that we had in our plan was to improve our earned revenue, so to speak, which would be the programmatic revenue, our membership growth, And so we're keeping track of that and continue to see that in an upwards trend. As Dominic mentioned before, we were very fortunate in 2019 to receive some grants that are covering 2 years. And those grants were a combination. The incremental grants were to cover innovation, to help us with Census 2020, to help us with some new programming that we were bringing to market. And then some of the foundations have helped to provide special funding for some of the consulting services that we do. So all of that support is allowing us then to be able to support you, our members, better. One of the other areas that was important was for the consulting practice and the consulting services that we provide to be able to get to a point where it pays for itself. And one of the shifts that we made in 2017 was to begin to have some of the Dana team members serve in a consultant capacity. And that allows us then, rather than outsourcing all consulting work, allows us to generate a little bit more margin for the program. And the one thing that is, not a financial benefit, but really I think has had a greater impact for the work that we do is by Dana team members working directly with nonprofits, helping to understand where your challenges and opportunities are. It's only allowed us then to be better at advocating for you out in the community. And so as some of you know, I've provided some of the consulting work myself, and I'll tell you, I just feel so much smarter when I'm talking to a legislator and they bring up something about housing, for example. I actually know something about that and can offer some perspective. But also more importantly, I think it's allowed us to identify nonprofits that could potentially be partners in some of the initiatives that they work on. And so, though we made this choice because we felt financially it would be good for the organization, it ultimately, in my mind, is part of that impact that we can bring for you because of our better understanding of where you are and what you need. The other area that we've focused on is continuing to expand the Alliance. I think that we all can agree that together we can be stronger. And so we have been focusing on not only growing membership, but then retaining membership. And I thought this was really interesting just to see how our retention is different by the different categories of nonprofits. And we do still have some work to do with some of the smaller nonprofits. We find sometimes that they join Dana, they're in a startup mode, and then they may not make it, or they may choose to change gears. So we still have some work to do in helping to support some of the smaller organizations. And we've been doing that in partnership with some of our alliance partners. The Freeman Foundation, Carl M. Freeman Foundation, the Sendell Foundation have provided scholarship funding so that small nonprofits can gain access to some of our consulting services around grant writing, around outcomes development and financial management. So we are looking at how we can diversify our service offerings so they meet the needs of the different types of nonprofits based upon their size or their area of expertise. I also want to give a shout out to our alliance partners. Some of them are on the call today. These are the foundations, both the nonprofit and the for-profit corporate foundations that have really served as a tremendous support for Dana. They're not only financially contributing to support Dana, but they are also partners with us. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time later talking about some of the work we did with the pandemic. It really shows how important philanthropy and nonprofits working together to affect the change that we make. So I just want to give a big thank you to our funding partners who are with us. And then the other part of membership is our associate members who are businesses that provide support to nonprofits. And we also have some government agencies that have joined Dana as a way to again become part of the Alliance. So I'm just really pleased to continue to see our membership grow and glad that you could be with us here today. This brings me to, even though this is an annual meeting about 2019, I can't help but talk about where we are today, and how proud I am and honored to be part of the COVID-19 response initiative in partnership with the Community Foundation, Philanthropy Delaware, and the United Way. And hopefully you all have heard of it, but it really was in the week before, actually, the governor announced the state of emergency. We recognized that we could probably be much more impactful if we were working together. And as you can see, there was a variety of different initiatives that emerged out of our work together. Some of the organizations like the United Way, Philanthropy Delaware, and the Community Foundation were leading the fundraising and grant making, while we're providing resources around training and development, but also providing information back to the foundation so that they understood what was happening. Thanks again to some of our funding partners who allowed us to redeploy some of our funds. We were able to offer a tremendous amount of workshops. We provided free HR support in the early weeks, actually all the way through June, for members to be able to access to really understand how they may have to make a shift in their organization. And we haven't stopped yet. We just launched a new page on our website called Recovery and Resiliency, where we've tried to curate a variety of tools, articles, webinars that you can reference, along with our Standards for Excellence material, so that as you're thinking about how your organization may need to shift or pivot, we want to provide you with the best resources quickly. But we also do have coaches and consultants that can work with you in a variety of different areas. I do want to go back to one thing. At the very bottom of this list, you'll see that we had 1,400 people so far attend our webinars. If you recall back to our annual report, I think we had about 780 that attended our workshops last year. So in just a few months, we've had double the number of people attend one of our learning sessions in this pandemic. Before I jump to Melissa, because she's actually going to spend some time and talk about public policy, I will say that our work is not done. I will also say that Dana is exploring how it pivots. There were some things that we provided in the early days of the pandemic that we received feedback that was considered great value. And so we're looking at how can we continue to provide some of those services in a sustainable way that is accessible both at price and to our members. So stay tuned. In the next, we have a board meeting coming up and working on our plans. We hope to be sharing more of that insight with you later in the year. But just know that as a nonprofit, we are working through a lot of the same things that you're working through. And many of the Dana team members are happy to listen and hear what your thinking is. And if we can provide help and support, you know that that's what we're here to do. Our job is to serve you. So in all of this pandemic, we're providing workshops, we're working with the foundations to figure out funding streams and opportunities. We also had a tremendous amount of public policy work to do. And I'm going to turn this over to Melissa Hopkins, who is going to walk you through some of the efforts that happened, but also what is currently still happening today. Melissa?
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you so much for logging in today. So I don't know about all of you, but the last 4 months have felt like 5 years. And know that this is sort of part of the sort of pandemic response life. So so talking through what that means from a policy standpoint. So 2019 feels like it was a decade ago. So I'm going to do a little focusing on what our 2020 has looked like thus far. And the biggest piece of that puzzle is the COVID-19 landscape. So as most of you know, in early March, we were sort of all figuring out what COVID would mean to our sector. And so when Governor Carney made the decision to initiate the state of emergency, that obviously it meant some changes for a lot of the way our organizations do regular business. But not just us, it meant that there were significant changes in how policy was adopted at the state. So starting with the Delaware General Assembly, March is obviously right around the time we'd all be coming back from the Joint Finance Committee break and thinking through like what the next steps for the budget look like. And so the legislature did not come back. They ended up governing virtually for the remainder of legislative session. And that had some significant implications for them as policymakers. So, and I think it's really important to recognize that, and then we can talk about how those decisions impacted our organizations. So that means that any legislation that wasn't really complete or necessary in terms of pandemic response did not get done this year. And because we're in the second half of the General Assembly, that means that anything that did not get done this year and not make it through the committee process is now dead. So we start with a whole new General Assembly come January because we have an election, obviously in November. So, so that hindered a lot of our policymakers' regular course of business, but that actually meant great things for us as nonprofits. So because they had to shift to a virtual, not just like virtual content, but they shifted into a virtual mindset. And that meant opening up a lot of the meetings to be accessible via Zoom or whatever your platform of choice may be. And so we were able as a sector to take part in small business caucus meetings, in committee meetings, to listen to the Joint Finance Committee work. And I have to tell you, that was so impressive to me when I would log into small business caucus meetings and more than half the participants were nonprofit leaders from across the state. And what was so amazing about that is you would see the chat box start to fill up with just important feedback to legislators about how critical nonprofits are to a highly functioning economy. And that if you're not treating them like small businesses and taking them seriously, that you are going to pay the price. So thank you to all of you who took the time out of your day to engage in all of those meetings that were taking place between March and the end of June. So our policy priorities, we set them, oh no, go back, thanks. Okay. So our policy priorities, we set up in the fall, and then we start to think about how we can implement them. And one of our biggest policy priorities for Dana was how do we get our members more engaged and really working together with our leaders. And as most of you know, we've done these subsector Wednesdays. We come down to the hall, talk to legislators, we tackle them in the hallway. It's very, very fun. So we weren't able to do that this year, but actually, I think the way that we shifted our advocacy really was, I mean, I heard from legislators, your members won't stop calling me. And I was like, oh, and then, you know, we just kept doing it. It was great. So I think that that is why we saw the outcomes that we saw from a state perspective. So Sheila, you can hop to the next slide now. So we did see as a result of COVID that the state needed to provide critical services. And, you know, one of our big issues this year was intended to be around how do we think through systemic contract reform with how our state contracts nonprofits for services. And we started to see that the state was making those adjustments after we've all sort of been in their ear about how to do that better. When push came to shove, we saw that the state actually did a little better when there was urgent need and they could move federal dollars a little faster given the urgent need. So we did see some expanded services and federal dollars pass through state agencies to nonprofits in order to expand services already underway So for an example, some senior centers were given a little bit more nutritional dollars so that they could feed beyond just seniors. They could feed some homeless populations if that was what the area required, or families. So we were able to see a little bit of an expansion of those dollars. In addition, to everyone that got a request from us asking you to sign on to a letter, I'm sorry and thank you. So we were working with the administration and with partners at the United Way, Delaware Community Foundation, and Philanthropy Delaware to communicate to state policymakers, both the governor and at the legislative level, what it was that we needed as nonprofits trying to navigate this crisis. So initially, the request for relief was around unemployment. A lot of our organizations self-insure because in a normal economy, that makes a ton of sense. But they weren't really prepared for what that looked like when the possibility of mass layoffs happened. So we were able to see that they were able to respond. And I have to say, Secretary Cade at the Department of Labor was an amazing partner on navigating unemployment for nonprofits. So we did see that grant and aid was fully funded. And just to give everyone here the feedback, Joint Finance Committee members indicated that given the crisis, they just did not feel it was responsible to cut any funds to nonprofits that were already trying to do so much more with so very little. So I say we all capitalize on that for next year, more to come. So in addition, we have been working through weekly meetings with representatives from the governor's office to talk through how do we take the federal coronavirus relief funds and to work to put that money into nonprofits in terms of reimbursing for PPE that had to be purchased, trying to reimburse for technology transition, because many of you had to go from an in-person service model to working from home, just like Team Dana did. And so what did that look like in order to get your team adequately working from home? You probably needed laptops, and there was a cost to that. And then additionally, in order to meet the phased reopenings, many organizations have had to step up their professional cleaning and disinfecting services in order to keep their constituency safe. So we think that those are appropriate use of federal coronavirus relief funds, and we're working with the state to create the parameters so we can get some of those funds out to nonprofits as a reimbursement. Thank you. So I already mentioned that Saran Cade was a partner. Whoa, what's happening? I already mentioned that Saran Cade was a partner, and just so that folks know, what he did was, before the CARES Act was passed, he recognized that the Unemployment Trust Fund was not going to be balanced on the nonprofits' back. So having nonprofits that had to lay people off pay in total the cost to reimburse the Unemployment Trust Fund was not going to solve the Unemployment Trust Fund problem. So he put an initial moratorium on billing for unemployment costs to nonprofits for 90 days. And then subsequently, he extended that deadline. And now we're seeing some federal legislation take place that is going to help resolve some of the concerns around unemployment dollars. So we already talked about how Dana and Philanthropy Delaware were having weekly meetings to problem solve some of the concerns that you were bringing to us. Thank you, by the way, for communicating those issues. And then our grant and aid support remain largely unchanged. Federal landscape, whole new world. So obviously, like, we've had a lot of action at the federal level, and Dana, in partnership with the National Council of Nonprofits, has been advocating on behalf of our members for the things that we need from the federal government as nonprofits. So the first thing that happened, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but just sequentially, not the exact first thing, but technically the second thing. But the first thing to really impact nonprofits was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So these were like the paid leave requirements and job protections, and then refundable payroll tax credits. So this was important because it was the initial, businesses are closing, nonprofits are closing. What are we going to do? How are we going to support our workforce? So I'm ready. But the big one that everyone, was the CARES Act. Can you go to the next slide? So the CARES Act, as many people know it, was a $2 trillion investment, and that did include significant supports for nonprofits. We had access to the Paycheck Protection Program, which I'm hoping that, better known as the PPP, not to be confused with PPE, which I do a lot when I'm having conversations with people. It's very confusing. So this allows for loan forgiveness, and I know a number of our organizations took advantage of the PPP program in order to get a forgivable loan in order to pay their staff, and that was for 8 weeks. And then the emergency EIDL loan was the $10,000 in 3 days, but that was not forgivable. And then the mid-sized business loan program for nonprofits, that helped the larger nonprofits that may not have qualified for some of these other programs because they had more than 500 employees. So Sheila, can we go forward a slide? Okay, so the other great thing about this was the charitable giving incentives. So as many of you may remember, what feels like 2 decades ago in 2017, we lost some of the opportunities for deductions. And so that hurt fundraising for nonprofits in a lot of ways. So this put back into place the above the line deduction, so a $300 donation in the 2020 tax year. And then it lifted the adjusted gross income cap and raised corporate contribution to 25% that they could write off. So this was super important because it allowed for money to come into nonprofits with an incentive to those giving it. Then, of course, we talked about unemployment. And so the federal government, as part of US CARES, they were able to give 50% to self-insured nonprofits, so that if you had to lay folks off, if you did not take advantage of the PPP loan program and you really needed to pause your operations, this allowed those employers to only have to pay 50% of the self-insured nonprofit rate. And to be fair, we are still working with our national partners to try and get that last 50% covered in the final legislation. And then this also added the additional $600 a week in addition to what the state provides in unemployment support. So Sheila, can we go back 2 slides? Sorry, my bad, it's out of order. Then we found that the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act helped to refine the PPP loan program. So there were some things that were problematic in the initial legislation because it was an attempt to really get the money out to businesses and to nonprofits that needed it in the immediate. So in acting fast, sometimes you find that once you implement something, there's a better way. So, so this was the cleanup bill that extended the maturity of the loan. It expanded the covered period. So it really addressed some of the questions around loan forgiveness. So this was the cleanup bill, essentially. So now can you go, sorry, Sheila. Okay, great. So additionally, there was the Federal Reserve Main Street program, which was intended for larger nonprofits to take advantage of along with larger businesses. And then we have the things that are working their way through now. So this is a terrible name for legislation, so please don't blame the messenger, but the Protecting Nonprofits from Catastrophic Cash Flow Strain Act. Of course, we all know that's very intuitive what that would do. What that does is it just is helping to resolve, the US Department of Labor put out a guidance around how unemployment, the 50% unemployment is reimbursed. And what it did was it stated that in order for states to get that reimbursement, that 50%, they had to charge the nonprofits the full 100% of the cost of that self-insured unemployment. And then the federal government would give them 50%. And then the Delaware Department of Labor would give 50% back to the nonprofit. Clearly, that is not well thought out. So Saran Cade, again, so grateful that he was working with us, said, no, we're going to just continue to put that on hold until we get language from the federal government figured out. So this was the cleanup bill for that. And then we have a couple of things that are just so you know, they're on the way. They are coming to a theater near you. The first is around addressing that charitable tax contribution. So this would, it's the Universal Giving Pandemic Response Act. So this is something that Senator Coons, yay, Delaware team, led, and it's really stripping that provision out of the 2017 change to the tax code. So then we'd be back to our regular course of business in terms of those who are contributing getting the ability to deduct that on their taxes. And then, you know, we talk about CARES 2.0. I'm sure all of you have heard that term. And, you know, what that looks like, we're not really clear on yet. They're still working out the details. But it sounds like, I feel like we're playing charades. It sounds like more money to states, additional money to low and moderate income taxpayers. This is the House version. The Senate version could look very different, with less money going out to states and to individual folks. So once we know more, you will know more. We'll communicate that so that you know what's coming. And that this HEROES Act, that passed the House, not the Senate. So we're just waiting to see what the Senate decides to do. However, know that this is time sensitive because the goal is to get it done so that senators can go back and campaign in their districts, because we have an election coming up. So that will be resolved very quickly. Sheila, is it okay do you want me to allow folks to ask any questions they may have?
I'd like to get through the rest of our stuff and make sure we do have time for questions. So let me just wrap it up and then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you. I do want to give just a reminder that the other thing that changed because of the pandemic was Census 2020. The self-response portion of the census collection has moved to October 31st. Delaware is currently at around 60% of self-response, and we had targeted 80%. We really can use your help if you are able to work with your clients, your constituents, your volunteers to encourage them to participate in census. These federal dollars that Melissa was referencing, the Delaware's portion is based upon census. And we've got to make sure that we count every person, because particularly the populations that need that federal funding the most are often the ones that are being, that might be less likely to participate in census. So we have plenty of material. We have physical material, we have digital material. Anything that you are interested in census, let us know and we'll make sure you can get it. As I mentioned earlier, we are, like many of you, we had to pause on some of our programming in 2020, push it either to the end of 2020 or into next year. So I just really quickly wanted to give you a little perspective on some of the initiatives that we've been exploring. As you may recall, we received incremental grant funding. Some of that was really to do some of this work. For those of you in Sussex County, Kent County, we did open office in Milton. And this was really because we feel that our physically being closer and working in Southern Delaware could create greater access for our members who are in Southern Delaware. Two of us actually live in Southern Delaware, so I would say that we've actually doubled our presence now in Southern Delaware with the pandemic. Diversity, equity, inclusion. Many of you may know last year we launched an initiative with our conference and then continue to offer workshops and webinars around topics related to creating equity cultures within your boards and within your organizations. And that work we intended to continue in 2020, but with the pandemic that moved. And so you'll see a collection of new learning sessions that will begin in September. And we're just finalizing some specifics around that. For those of you in Wilmington, you were invited to participate in a new program with Board Lead, and that was for organizations over 250,000. Board Lead is a company that works in major metropolitan areas to connect employees of large firms with board service. And we were able to convince them to participate here in Delaware. Actually, truth be told, Jen Cho, who's on our board, convinced them that Wilmington would be a great place to move to. And they did that because we were here and would be able to work with them. However, we wanted to add on an additional component, and that was a special cohort of individuals of color, really building on the great work that Trustees of Color did over the past 10 years, and that organization has now closed. And so unfortunately, we were not able to launch that component of the cohort, but we hope to do that in 2021. Our goal is that with the success of the Board Lead program with Dana, that we would be able to expand that with Board Lead to the rest of the state in 2021. So stay tuned on that. We are just wrapping up the first round of candidates that were recruited to nonprofit boards. In fact, Lisa, who joined us, is one of those candidates. So we participated in the program as well. And then finally, Dana is participating in the United Way's Racial Equity Social Justice Collaborative, and really trying to understand how we as an organization can continue to support and build equity cultures in nonprofits, both through the work that we do internally with our own organization, but also how we can support the sector. And so there will be some more initiatives coming forward. Have had some really powerful conversations with leaders of color and the individuals who are leading the Racial Equity Social Justice Initiative. So I'm really looking forward to how we can be a part of the change that we want to see here in Delaware. Our sector research and planning, we had actually just completed a whole round of focus groups and interviews, and was pulling together a task group to really look at how nonprofits could not just survive, but thrive in the state of Delaware. And obviously with COVID-19, that really has changed the landscape and some of our thinking. And so the flash surveys, along with several of the listening sessions that we have been conducting, are helping to inform how we may need to think about our support long-term for advancing the nonprofit sector and helping it to remain healthy and thriving. And then finally, we have a partnership with Philanthropy Delaware, as many of you know, called Share Delaware. And we were just about ready to launch a new 2.0 version. That also went on hold. And so our plans are to work on that for the remainder of 2020. So in fall of 2020, we hope to have a new platform that will provide some additional data in addition to what you've been able to see with Share Delaware. And then finally, we are working on some additional services. This is kind of getting into the work that we may need to do to support you as we go through the rest of 2020 and into 2021. What additional services do we need to provide? I will say that those of you who participated in these surveys have been so helpful for us. We really believe that rather than us coming up with our own ideas, that we need to hear from you. So I do appreciate all of you who have been participating in the flash surveys. Our next survey will be towards the end of the year, and that will be our membership survey. And as I mentioned earlier, we measure our outcomes through those membership surveys. Our last one was in 2018. So I hope that you will be kind enough to participate in that survey at the end of 2020. So I know we're running out of time, but I would like to see what questions have come up. And Mel, if you could perhaps, look through those questions and let us know, and then we can determine who will answer them.
All right, the first question that I saw pop up was from Colleen, and it says, how long is the extension to the initial 90 days for unemployment? And
So that would be a good question for Melissa.
So,
No.
so
Yeah.
it's not an extension of actual unemployment. It's an extension on the moratorium on billing self-insuring nonprofits for their percentage of the unemployment trust fund. So if you laid folks off, they initially would have required 100% of a reimbursement, with the federal government paying the other 50%. So they are going to maintain that until the president signs the bill, which he has not signed the federal bill yet. And then they'll have a path forward on how they'll start billing nonprofits again for 50% of the cost of unemployment, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Melissa. Mel, other questions?
The next question was, who responds to contact Dana on your website? Some of those actually come to me. It depends on the email. If it's, I get the exec admin and I think the info comes to me and Naya. So.
And then Mel and Naya will direct it to the Dana team member that can answer the question. If for some reason you have sent in a request and you've not gotten a response, please forgive us. Feel free to send it again, or if you'd like, you could send it directly to me, and then I can make sure it gets to the right person. I will say that I'm sure, like many of you, our inboxes have filled up, and they fill up quickly. And if we didn't respond, please know that wasn't, we're doing our best, and we'll continue to work harder on that.
Is there any other questions? Those are the only two that I see that came through. Oh, here's one. How can I become a member? Let's see. Of the Leads a Color conversation you were having about diversity.
Oh, sure. That's looks like it's Angeline. I'm happy to speak with you afterwards. The racial justice, the Racial Equity Social Justice Initiative that the United Way is leading is an open process, and I'd be happy to connect you with Michelle Taylor, who is leading that. And then if you'd like to learn more about Dana's work, I'm happy to speak with you about that.
All right, and Connecting Generations. The one who wants to be added as well from Connecting Generations, if you could give me your name, I can add you to that list.
Great, thank you.
Ken Bach wants to know, is Dana engaging with the governor's office on reopening for nonprofits?
We are absolutely in conversations. We are not serving on the pandemic resurgence task force that the governor put together. But we are in conversations with them. Right now, our primary focus has been on seeing how we can secure, on behalf of our members, funding from the CARES Act to help with the reimbursement, as Melissa mentioned. And as far as strategies around reopening, if there are some specific areas or concerns that you feel that need to be risen up, please let us know. You can send it to Melissa Hopkins, and that, we'll definitely move that forward.
So Sheila, can I say one more thing about that? I think Ken asked the question. So just so that you're aware, because we have such a myriad of nonprofit agencies, the phased reopenings look different based on the services they provide. But the other thing that I just want, for the good of the order for everyone, the pandemic resurgence advisory groups are all public meetings held virtually and open to the public. So sorry about that, guys. So you can log in, listen, give public comment. I'm sure they'd love to hear from someone other than just me on the needs of nonprofits on the business subcommittee. So just be aware that that's an opportunity for you to share your needs, also in the event of resurgence.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I want to respect folks' time, but I also would be remiss if I didn't mention our annual conference coming up. We also pivot. This was originally scheduled for April, and we moved it to a virtual conference in August. what's really exciting is that the speakers who we had originally engaged were willing to journey with us on this virtual conference, but they have modified their presentations and their conversation in light of the health and economic situation and the racial equity and social justice situation. And so they've been really just really excited to be part of this conversation. And so I hope that you can join us. We are, Melissa, who's been leading this, has done a phenomenal job in setting up the conference. It's multi-day. And I had to add in there's lots of special surprises. So it's designed, you know, one of the things that we hear about our conferences is that folks really love to connect with one another and to network. And so we have done our best to try to simulate that level of engagement. So you'll have to let us know what you think as you go through it, but we are asking folks to register. There is going to be, as I said, multi-day. We've got 2 keynote speakers, and really looking at, we had a chance to have all the speakers meet together so that they could hear what each other was going to talk about. And what's really just amazing is how they understand that this is not about just nonprofit recovery, but this is really about the systems and the structural racism, the inequities, that this is our moment to not only think about how we recover and move forward with our organizations, but really how do we recover our communities and how do we move our communities forward. So I hope that you'll join us. If you have any questions or you need help with registration, please don't hesitate to reach out. So with that, I'd like to turn the meeting over to our board chair to close us out.
Sure, thanks Sheila, and thanks for everyone reminding me to put my device on mute since it was distracting. I apologize for that. But you know, thank you all. Thank you, Sheila, Mel, Melissa, and the entire Dana team. Thank you all for participating today. It's you who makes this incredibly valuable. I just ask that you all be safe, be well, and keep in touch. And if there's no further business, I will officially adjourn the meeting. Have a good week, everyone.
Thank you, Dominic. Have a
Take
great
care.
week, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.